So as you know, I like to ride the mountain bike in the morning. When I come to the gym, they have a whole set of mountain bikes that I can use. But the problem is they are locked. Now that's not an issue because I can get them unlocked. But sometimes it can take 10 minutes or so for somebody to come and sort it all out. So I thought I would solve, using a bit of logic and a bit of psychology, how to unpick the lock without either using an implement or cutting it. I just use a bit of logic and maths and a bit of psychology to figure out what the combination was on the lock. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. Please like and comment on the video below. That will allow me to produce better quality videos and more of them in the future. So you may ask why I would do a video on that, but it's a great way of working out how to solve problems. And there are problems all over the place. They all involve a bit of logic, a bit of maths, and I found in life they all involve a bit of psychology as well. And I thought it would make for an interesting video in how I solved this problem, because it will help you solve similar problems within the market. And it involves biases, it involves understanding the way that something is constructed, a market typically, but in this case a lock. And let's go on and talk about how I solved this problem. So if you look at this lock, it's a fairly typical combination lock. You've got 9 digits which rotate on here, and each one of these digits is basically, well, you get 10 in total, so it's 10 by 10 by 10 by 10 are the number of combinations that you have in the lock. So how can you possibly solve it? Just by observing things. I mean, it's not, it would take you forever to be able to guess what this particular combination is. Well, it was quite simple really. When people lock this up, what they tend to do is they just turn the digits randomly. So they just do something like that. But usually when it's locked or unlocked, people just sort of do that, and they don't bother to turn it properly. And they always tend to turn it in one direction as well. They don't tend to sort of go this way, that way, this way, that way, or 2 this way and 2 that way. People just sort of go blur, blur, blur. So there's your bit of psychology. The way that people do this is when they lock a lock, excuse the expression, or when they scramble a lock, they just tend to put the key in or take the key out, lock it, and then they just go blur. And that's the way that they do it. So what I started to do is every time I turned up in the morning, just for fun, it was just purely an intellectual exercise, I would make a note of where the combination was. So if it was on this combination here, I'd write down this particular combination, and then the following morning, if it was on a different combination, I'd write down a different combination. And then over a period of time I was able to build up a pattern of which one of these combinations occurred the most frequently. Because say you did that, but you only turned the top one 1, or maybe you turn the bottom ones, the same number of numbers would occur given a certain distribution. You would see a bump in the distribution based upon how the lock was actually combined, how all these numbers were combined. Now sometimes people would really scramble it up and that would contain no information, but by carefully observing the numbers on each of the locks, I would be able to understand the distribution of numbers and then start to guess which numbers occurred the most frequently, and therefore what the combination was. So did it work? Well, let's see. So I've turned the padlock around so you can't see the combination, but there you go, there is an unlocked padlock. I have done this using a bit of maths and a bit of psychology. There was nothing weird about the way that I did this. I didn't have the combination, and I didn't fiddle it, cut it, or try and pick it. I just used maths and a bit of psychology to do it, and there is the unlocked lock. So why am I showing you a video about how I undid a lock? Well, the reason being is a great analogy, because it shows you the way that I think. And the way that I solve the problem with the bikes is the same way that you solve a problem in the markets, in that you look at the market and it looks impossibly complex, and yet when you start digging down below the top level, you begin to realize that there are loads of little biases dotting around all over the place. In aggregate, yes, the market tends to be fairly accurate, but when you look underneath the skin of that, you just realize that there are all sorts of things going on that create that view of the particular market. Now, with a lock, with a padlock, you could use brute force, get an axe to it to solve the problem and just cut through it. But you can't within the market, and that's why when I saw that problem, I just thought I would be a little bit cleverer and think the problem through to understand the best way of solving it without using brute force. And that's essentially what you have to do in the market. if you look at that lock, there was 10 to the power of 4, 10,000 different combinations. It seems impossible that you could reasonably be able to open the lock without brute force, and yet I did it. I figured out what the combination was, and relatively quickly as well, it has to be said. And when you look at the markets, there are so many variations on everything that goes on with the market, but there are repeating patterns, consistently repeating patterns. And when I first saw this, I couldn't understand it. And and the other amazing thing for me was that biases have persisted over many, many, many years. And I just thought that that was impossible. But then you begin to realize that there are other reasons for that. The way that people participate in the market, the way that people perceive information, all manner of different things tends to lead to those biases in the market. And I tend to see them in sports and financial markets. So yeah, the reason for showing you the lock picking video was that it's a great analogy for the way that I think and the way that I put that to use within the market. I'm looking at the market, it looks impossibly complex, but there are repeating patterns within it, and a lot of them are caused by the psychology of the participants, whether that's directly or indirectly. And if you want to look at solving complicated problems, very often they're not as complicated as they first seem.